that a military doctor is part of the White House scheme to conceal the president's true mental condition from all of us?
There isn't anything that's a part of the president's health records or his overall physical fitness or any medications that he's taking that you're not permitted to tell us. Is there anything you're keeping from us for privacy reasons?
If anyone ever needed extensive cognitive screening, my goodness, what medications are you on, Acosta? Now, there were endless questions about Trump's diet, his workout routine or lack thereof. Wouldn't you like to see that routine? His weight. And one reporter asked the doctor for his waist measurements. You first, sweetheart. Then this afternoon, a member of NBC's investigative unit tweeted out this gem, seeing a lot of skepticism over the idea that real Donald Trump weighs only 239 pounds. Would he step on a scale in public to prove it? Yeah, he'll do that when reporters and anchors agree to public lie detector tests during their broadcasts or after their broadcasts. As Trump's team is renegotiating NAFTA, freeing up our energy sector, smashing ISIS, cracking down on MS-13, all the rest, the Democrats and a gaggle of globalist never-Trumpers, and of course everybody in the media, are making complete and total buffoons of themselves. It's actually embarrassing. No self-respect. Because of their phony, politicized bluster on race, what's going to happen? I'll tell you what's going to happen. More Americans will end up tuning them out. And sadly, in the process, tuning out real racism when it happens. And if Democrats really decide to put amnesty for illegal immigrants ahead of funding the government for American citizens, they'll have blown yet another opportunity to be a party of solutions instead of stunts. Ronald Reagan once said that governments have a tendency not to solve problems, only to rearrange them. Well, eager to change that sad reality, the Trump administration is actually working to expand economic opportunity for all Americans and also solve complicated problems along the way. I ask you this. What other president has stood up to China and its theft of American intellectual property and its myriad of unscrupulous trade practices? Name one. And what other president has begun to bring capital and manufacturing back to the United States? They all said it was impossible, right? Trump didn't believe them. And what other president has insisted on immigration changes that will benefit working class Americans instead of just benefiting the wealthy, all of those rich people who want their cheap labor? He is doing this and enduring constant, nonstop, unfair, nasty criticism. And he's doing it for one simple reason: to improve the standard of living for the American people, people of all races and at every economic level. And while it is true that President Trump can sometimes step on his own good news, sometimes, of course, saying nothing is the best thing, and maybe you should abide by that once in a while, he's actually trying to do what so many politicians have promised but could not deliver: a better, stronger, and yes, a more united America. My friends, I will take solutions over stunts any day of the week. And that's the angle. Now let's get into all of this with our superb panel of guests. In New York is Monica Crowley, Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, and Juan Williams. You see him at 5 p.m. every night as co-host of FNC's The Five. And with me here in Washington is Corey Lewandowski, former Trump campaign manager, author of the fabulous New York Times bestselling book, Let Trump Be Trump. Okay, Juan, I want you to have the first crack at this. Where did I go wrong? Because I imagine you have a long list. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think you're in a difficult position. You know, I love you, but I just think that it's hard to defend Trump. But you did a terrific job of trying. On the race front, I mean, it's hard for a guy who began his campaign, I mean, even before he was running, as a birther, and then is known to say that fine people are marching with white supremacists in Charlottesville, and now this latest S-hole comment. It's just kind of hard. But I think that you're making the case that, you know, there are a lot of good things happening. The press doesn't pay attention. So I listen to you. But on the race stuff, I think it's a little bit hard for you.
And Corey, you've known Trump for a while now. I've known him for about 14, 15 years. My view here is if this guy was some secret racist, man, he did a really good job of hiding it all those years. Man, he was hanging out with Jesse Jackson, donated a building for him to put his Rainbow Push Coalition in, pictures of him, glad handing with Al Sharpton. But we're supposed to believe now it's all out in the open. He's a secret racist.
Well, and don't forget, Don King was campaigning with the candidate on the campaign trail, and I don't think Don King ever accused Mr. Trump of being a racist. But the amazing thing is, right, people don't want to give Donald Trump the credit that he has seen in the election. Don't forget, it was just before the election. CNN said Donald Trump would get less than 1% of the African-American vote. He actually had a higher percentage of the African-American vote than any candidate since Bob Dole in 1996. Look what he's done for the African-American community. Lowest unemployment in African-American right now ever recorded, right? That's not racism. That's about being America first and putting everybody back to work. It's not a racist issue when you're putting people back to work and you're stopping illegal aliens from coming into the country and killing Americans.
Monica, here's the problem with the racism charge is once you say racist, it kind of shuts down dialogue and it kills goodwill. I wouldn't be up here doing what I'm doing every night if I thought Donald Trump was a racist. I take that charge very seriously, and I would not do it. But for him to endure this day after day after day, regardless of any of the good things that are happening, to me, says a lot more about the people accusing him than it does about what's in this man's heart.
Yeah, and I think, we make a mistake when we play according to the narrative that the media wants us to play on, when they want us to play on their turf and they're defining all of the rules of the debate and the conversation. Donald Trump represents an existential threat to them in the media, to the establishment on both sides of the aisle. Therefore, he has to be destroyed. So the media is going down this long list to try to destroy him. And of course, nothing is working. So first he was a Russian colluder, and then he was mentally ill, and then he was a racist, and now they're down, Laura, to does the guy wear dentures? I mean, they are so desperate. They are like stalking him like psychopaths. They're not covering him the way they're supposed to because they're trying everything. They are throwing the kitchen sink at him in order to try to warp the narrative among the American people to see him in a way that they don't see him. They see him as somebody bringing real results, concrete improvements to their actual lives, economically, politically, culturally, etc. They cannot stand it. And you know what, Laura? I think what drives the media so crazy, what makes them so furious, is that when he tweets and when he speaks, he's actually beating them at their own game, and they cannot stand it.
He reminds me of kind of the whole Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote cartoon, one of my favorite cartoons. Where, Wile E. Coyote has that Acme TNT thing. He's going to blow him up. He's going to catch him on the cliff. Then he's going to get him around the corner. And it's like, meep, meep, and it just takes off. And then they can't. I'm good at voices, by the way. Let's talk about Cory Booker, Juan. He's someone who I think people looked at for many years as kind of a centrist Democrat. I've gotten to know him very, casually years ago when people were hailing him as a new type of Democrat. And today he put on what I think was quite a performance in the interrogation of the DHS secretary. He conjured up all of this, the tears of rage, the I'm so outraged, how could you say this? As if he's never sat at a Senate hearing where a cabinet member actually defends the president of the United States. He acted like this DHS secretary was complicit in, marching with the KKK. I found it a low point for him, and I found that he had lost a lot of credibility with a lot of people.
Well, so here's where I agree with you. I thought it was theatrical. But let me also say that I think as a U.S. senator, as a politician, I think it was incumbent upon him to say, hey, DHS secretary, you were in the room and somehow you can't remember. You say that there was bad language. Even people say, well, what bad language did you hear? That's what Dick Durbin, the senator from Illinois, who has said that the president said the asshole comment, said to her, so what bad language did you hear? She said this on Fox News Sunday. She couldn't answer. So she clearly was, as you describe her, defending the president.
So what? Why should it be? Why should a cabinet member have to reveal anything about a private conversation?
Well, fine, because it
in
was
the
on
Oval Office with the president? I find this whole thing to be one big
hold on.
distraction.
Here you're
They're
going off the
losing
rails
on the
because
economy. They're losing on all this
who's
stuff.
the one that keeps changing the story, Laura? The White House. The White House did not deny that he said it initially. Then they come back and the president says,
I don't care if he did say it.
I didn't say it. Then the White House
Big
says, well,
deal.
maybe he said a different kind of profanity with regard. But the point is the same. He's saying black people from Africa, from Haiti, brown people from El Salvador, we don't want them in the lottery. We don't need people from these countries.
He did not say the people. He said the countries, and describing it as Lindsey Graham described Mexico and Central America. Lindsey Graham
Laura,
said hell.
We're not letting countries in. We're letting people, human beings who have talent and who've been admitted to this country as the Irish, the Italians, the Jews, the Catholics, and they have made America great right now.
When Obama used similar language to describe a Middle Eastern country, does that make him racist? Does that make him insensitive?
No, but he wasn't saying keep out people from those countries. Did he say keep out people from that Middle Eastern country? I see.
It's describing a whole country filled with people.
You can describe a corrupt government. You can describe a failed economic system, but you should not talk about people that way.
Juan, you were discriminated against at NPR for your viewpoint. And that was horrible what they did to you.
Thank you. Yep,
they
I
didn't
agree.
treat you fairly, and you wrote a great book about it, but I loved your book. That was so unfair. And I think it's a similar thing what's happening now. It's not viewpoint discrimination. It is discrimination in a way against a president's record of early success. It's still early, but early success in totally deviating from the truth of the facts. We're getting to whether, he's fat now, and we haven't even gotten into that, Corey. Now the press at the White House today, well, does he really weigh 239? Get on a scale. I've seen it all now.
Look, the outrage over every single thing that this president has done is so overblown. Now they're calling into question a medical doctor who also performed the same exact tests on Barack Obama and George W. Bush. But now they're calling into question, are you giving us all the information? Does he really weigh 239? Does he wear dentures? What else are you not telling us? Look, you know what the greatest part was? This guy gets on television and says...
Nuts. These people in the press room have gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. They're crazy.
Laura, he gets on television and he says, Trump has amazing genes. He's got great genes. That's amazing.
He's probably in better health than most of those people who sit on their duff all day and or they exercise like at a 90-minute spin class, and they're
Laura?
like, oh, I'm in good shape.
You know what, Laura?
I'm
JFK had all kinds of serious illnesses. He was a walking horror show of pills and injections. We never heard about that. Barack Obama was a smoker. I never heard any kind of comments about what kind of risk that might be to the president of the United States. They are raising the bar for Donald Trump because they've got to find some sort of cudgel to destroy this man. And the fact that he is still standing upright, carrying out his duties as president,
and
is
drinking
a miracle.
his Diet Coke, by golly.
He works 19 hours a day, every day.
And I think we should all have a bucket of chicken and a couple of Big Macs to celebrate that health report.
I think we have to have
what is it?
He likes Starburst, so he can't have dentures. That
Starburst will pull out your fillings.
That's what I
think. We're now getting into hell with ISIS and what China's doing. Let's focus on the Starburst. Oh my gosh. And you guys, you're such a great panel. Thank you so much. And by the way, Mitt Romney in the Senate. Oh, we have a Romney coming up that really does like President Trump quite a bit. We're going to ask some very interesting questions of a potential Romney run from a relative. Don't go away. Mitt Romney is considering a run for the Senate, raising the question, would he be more of an ally or an adversary of President Trump? Romney delivered a scathing speech during the 2016 presidential campaign, calling then candidate Trump a phony and a fraud. That was just the nice stuff, who's been playing the American public for suckers. But our next guest, who knows both men pretty well, says Romney is no never-Trumper. Ronna McDaniel is both Romney's niece and the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee. Ronna, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Always good to be here.
Okay, so what's Mitt going to do? This is the big question. Number one.
So my advice.
Inside scoop here.
Inside scoop. I don't ask him what he's going to do.
Oh, come on.
So I can come on shows and say I have no idea. I don't even ask my dad. I'm not fun on that front. But I will say my advice to any Republican is spend your time focusing focusing on the Democrats. Look at Schumer, look at Pelosi, look what they'd do if they were holding the reins of this country, where our country would be today. Focus on them. Stop focusing on the Republicans. I always say, if you have a problem in your family, don't go on Jerry Springer. And this president's doing a great job. We should be supporting him.
But he did send out this tweet right after the S-hole controversy, comment controversy. He said, the poverty of an aspiring immigrant's nation of origin is as irrelevant as their race. The sentiment attributed to POTUS, the president, is inconsistent with America's history and antithetical to American values. May our memory of Dr. King buoy our hope for unity, greatness, and charity of all. That was a dig at the president, Rana.
Well, we've seen many different accounts come from this meeting. The president has said it's been totally misrepresented. I take the president's word at that.
So you're taking the president over Uncle Mitt, correct?
The president was in the meeting, so yeah, I take the president's word at what he said. He's representing himself, and he's talking about better immigration, better borders, focusing on things that are going to help make this country safer and great again.
You know, I keep thinking of the senators and congressmen who opposed Trump, who happen to be Republicans. It hasn't worked out so well for them. I mean, Boehner is gone. You know, he was kind of middle of the road. But, you know, Flake is on his way out. Corker was kind of in and out. He's gone. I mean, I don't see the play here. Like, oh, I'm going to be a never Trumper. Okay, I guess. I mean, but I don't even know where that gets you.
So what are you going to be against? Lower unemployment, more jobs, a better economy? I mean, look at where our country is a year into this Trump administration. We are humming. We're on the right track. This is a president everyone should be getting behind. I hope Democrats will hear the word and start supporting this president as well.
Now, this is what Chuck Schumer, I know you were up watching The Late Show last night, Rhonda. You were just glued to your TV. This is what Schumer said to Colbert. Let's watch.
He's not a racist. Well,
he's the least racist person.
The least racist person you'd ever speak to.
All time.
So I have a challenge for Donald Trump, okay? Actions speak louder than words. You want to just begin that long road back to proving you're not a racist, you're not bigoted. Support the bipartisan compromise that 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats have put on the floor. Everyone gave, and get the Dreamers safety here in America.
By the way, Rana, that's just the first step toward Trump's redemption. Yeah, just to give everything they want to the Gang of 6, and then he'll have a teeny baby step toward not being a racist. Thanks, Chuck.
Exactly. Well, I'm sure Chuck Schumer is the person the president's listening to right now. I'd say to Chuck Schumer, why don't you take some advice from yourself 20 years ago when you voted for a wall, when you said we needed to fix immigration, when you recognized that we had a border issue. Maybe Chuck Schumer should go revisit his past self and support some of the things that the president's putting on the table, that it's going to make our country safer.
Now, the Democrats keep saying, well, I got all these vacancies, retirements, the Republicans get wiped out in the House, you could lose the Senate and the House. I mean, they're going into the full wish list here, but the Republicans are toast. What's the real scoop, you think?
Well, the RNCs
don't sugarcoat it.
The RNCs raised record money. We know that the midterms of the first term of the presidency are usually brutal. We've been ready for it. We're in 22 states. We have the best data and ground game. We're ready to compete, and we have an economy that's doing well. We've got accomplishments to run on. We've got a president that's leading the way. I don't think it's going to be what the Democrats hope, but I want our base energized, so go ahead, worry, get out there, be engaged, volunteer. We have a national day of training on Saturday on the first anniversary of this inauguration. Get out. You cannot rest. This is going to be that type of election that we're going to have to work as hard as we can to keep majorities.
Okay, you know I always ask you this.
Yes, you do.
I want the comments most frequently made on the return envelopes when you ask for money, you send out mass mailings, people write, do this, don't do this. What's the most common thing?
So I got my homework done today for you.
Good.
So we have had actual record low dollar fundraising in January.
Good, which is a good sign.
And the number one thing that people are saying on the phones and on the mail is we need to keep our majority in Congress because we need to support this president. So it's not even us soliciting donations. We actually have people calling because they're so concerned. We are beating 2016, 2014, any other election year in small dollar donations because our base is so energized.
They want the wall built. They don't want to just do amnesty with getting nothing for it.
They support this president. They support his agenda.
Rana, great to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in. And straight ahead, by the way, Senator Marco Rubio worked with the Democrats back in 2013 on an immigration bill, and that blew up. So what's changed? The Gang of 6, Gang of 8? Rubio will tell us next. Capitol Hill as lawmakers debate the fate of DACA and look for a way to keep the government open past a Friday midnight deadline. Senator Marco Rubio joins us now from Capitol Hill to discuss those and a lot of other issues. Thanks for joining us, Senator Rubio. Let's get right to it. The topic of the day is this immigration impasse once again. And for our viewers out there, are you more attuned to the current Durbin-Graham version of the immigration bill, or would it be closer to the Republicans who are called the more hard-line people like Tom Cotton or Senator Perdue?
Well, I don't know the details of the Graham-Durbin proposal other than what's been expressed in the media. I haven't seen those details. I can tell you what I believe in. I believe we do have to build a wall and improve our overall security, like at airports with entry, exit. I believe we should end the diversity lottery. I've been saying that for about 5 years. I believe that we should move toward a merit-based system of immigration. I believe that we should figure out a way, like the president has, to deal with people that find themselves, or many of the people that find themselves now under a DACA designation. And I think the big debate has been, how do you put all that together? And the way I view it is the president's #1 priority is border security. The Democrats are insisting on DACA. And so in order to get it passed under this sort of framework that we're in now, each side is going to have to get something. But what else gets in there is what the debate has been about. And so I support ending the diversity lottery. I think we should admit people to the United States based on what they're going to contribute to the United States. And that's why I've long called for a merit-based system of immigration, irrespective of what country you're coming from. It shouldn't be country-based, it should be person-based.
Absolutely. And Senator, back in 2015, you gave a speech, or I guess back and forth with Hannity at CPAC, and you said, I've learned my lesson on immigration. And your point was that we have to do enforcement first before we can get to the other parts, you said. And that was obviously because of the Gang of Eight. That went down in flames. But the Gang of Eight, now it's a Gang of Six. And you have Lindsey Graham out there who today said we need different partners, willing partners in the White House. What of that? I mean, the White House is the White House. The president ran on the wall and enforcement, and he's willing to do DACA, too.
Well, just about anything we pass here, you're going to have them sign it. So that's the only partner at the end of the day that's going to matter, is what the president will sign. And by the way, the lesson I referred to in 2015 was more than just border security first. It was with a step-by-step approach versus a comprehensive one in which you try to do all these things together. It says, you're seeing now, you're only talking about 5 things and they can't put it together. So that's why I've long believed that you start with security first. That's something everybody should agree on. I don't know why anybody would argue that we shouldn't secure our border and enforce our immigration laws. And then you moved into modernization, which are things like making it merit-based or getting rid of the diversity lottery, basically going to a person-based immigration system as opposed to a country or family-based one.
Right, but
and
Senator,
when
I'm sorry to interrupt, but they are doing amnesty at the same time. Not everybody, but they are doing 800,000 at the same time. So they're kind of doing a smaller version of what you guys tried to do in 2013, and that obviously didn't work out well, and the president's still willing to give in this circumstance.
Well, that's the point. I mean, everybody involved in this negotiation is saying, we understand that we're going to deal with the DACA situation, but you've got to do strong enforcement that's going to happen. And one of the differences between now and 2013 is you have someone at the White House that people trust is actually going to do it. That's a big dynamic shift from where we stood at this time in 2013, arguing about whether or not the enforcement would even happen. Even if we passed a law, people would argue that it wouldn't happen. So that's a difference.
Are you for the aunts and uncles and all of that to come in?
No. So I think keeping the nuclear family is one thing. I think allowing people to claim their parents or other relatives is not something that I'd support. And to me, that's part of moving away from the family-based system and towards the merit-based system.
Let's talk about what Jeff Flake is saying tomorrow. Another one of your colleagues. We've got a lot of charges. First, Trump's a racist, which I assume you don't agree with. That's what Durbin is saying. You don't agree with that, right?
I've never seen him say or do anything in front of me that leads me to believe that. People have a right to have whatever opinion they want, but I certainly have never viewed him that way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you sit down in a room with someone one day and 2 days later say, well, he's a racist. But now Jeff Flake is giving a speech tomorrow where he's comparing Trump's treatment of the press to Joseph Stalin's. And of course, Stalin, the Great Purge, 20 million to 60 million deaths attributed to him. How do we get here, Senator?
Well, I think, look, I don't agree with everything the president does. I bet you don't agree with everything the president does. But one of the things that is happening is exaggeration. And just like the president does things from time to time that I don't agree with or would have done differently, I think the reaction to it is often very exaggerated. I haven't given the speech yet, so we'll see what he says tomorrow. But I don't think there's any comparison, not just between this president, but any American public figure with Joseph Stalin. But again, I don't know if that's what he's going to say in a speech. I mean, he hasn't given it yet.
Yeah, well, he's teased it. Let's talk about what you want to do to prevent foreign governments from interfering in American elections. You're teaming up with Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat, and what is your goal and what do you intend to do?
So there's clearly a Russia element to it, because there's no doubt the Russians tried to interfere in our election. By the way, in my view, not simply to favor a candidate. That may have been what they felt like at the end, but for much of it, it was just to sow discord. But my bigger problem, we can't do about, we can only deal with what's happened in the past prospectively, or looking back retroactively. But prospectively, the biggest threat to America's electoral system, and quite frankly, America at large, is not Russia. It's China. It's China's has basically infiltrated its way into all of our technologies across the supply chain. They make anything the Russians can do look like child's play, and that includes stealing secrets. That includes influencing individuals in American government through a lot of different methods, and that includes potentially interfering in an election. So I think the biggest threat moving forward is not the Russians, it's actually the Chinese. They are much larger with a lot more capability and a lot more money, and that's one of the things I thought about when getting involved in this legislation.
And any thoughts about this New York Times piece that just came out tonight, that the administration is going to be reviewing possible plans to expand our military response with nuclear weapons to potential cyber attacks on water, communications, other essential services that would basically shut down the power grid, et cetera?
Yeah, so I promise you that there's going to be overreaction to that as well. Some of the same things I told you, exaggeration. You'll see headlines that say Trump wants nuclear attack because of hacking. That's not what this is about. By the way, this doctrine is actually not new. It's just been expanded and now, of course, been made public. The bigger thing about this is, you talking about some of these attacks, we're talking about things that would knock planes out of the sky, kill patients in hospitals, wipe out millions of dollars from bank accounts, paralyze our electric grid. I mean, I'm talking about massive loss of life if the kinds of attacks that are being tried to anticipated here are the attacks that happen. People need to know ahead of time, if you do this, we're not going to have a series of town hall meetings to talk about why did this happen. This is what the response is going to be. Countries know what the response is going to be if they launch a nuclear attack against us. They need to know what that response is going to be if they launch a massive, life-threatening cyber or irregular attack, as I think a lot of countries that may not have a nuclear capability or may have a small nuclear capability have the ability to expand into this territory if we don't do a better job of protecting ourselves.
Senator Rubio, thanks so much for spending some time with us tonight. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks.
And a phone call between President Trump and the Chinese president turns very tense over a still growing, whopping trade imbalance. The details when John Bolton joins us next.
Whatever you're doing to stay healthy, there's something you may be missing. A key part of your wellness that you may be
Okay, before we go, I want to get back to our old friend Cory Booker. Of course, squeezing drama from every scene is a default for him. Remember that imaginary friend whom then Newark Mayor Booker referenced repeatedly in his stump speeches dating back to the late 90s? Back in 2013, National Review recounted the bizarre item this way. T-Bone, the drug pusher, who the mayor has said threatened his life at one turn and sobbed on his shoulder the next, is a figment of his imagination, even though Booker has talked about him in highly emotional terms and in great detail. T-Bone? He was mayor of Newark, New Jersey, not of Natchez, Mississippi. Oh, come on. We're just messing with you, Senator Booker. We'd love for you to come on down to the Bureau, sit down with us, consider it an open invitation. And by the way, what? Oh, T-Bone's watching and says hi. Hasn't talked to you for a while. Misses you. That's it for us tonight. Miss Shannon, take it away.
We don't have any cool nicknames around here, but we're going to work on that, Laura. Thank you. Here's what we have coming up tonight.
Heated words and pointed accusations today on Capitol Hill.
She has a limited memory.
Now we wait to see who blinks first on DACA and a potential government shutdown.
I think somebody on the staff gave him really bad advice.
Ed Henry working the phones, finding out what's next. Chris Stirewalt weighing the odds of a shutdown. Peter Doocy investigating what could be a stunning plan in the works, a crackdown on sanctuary city leaders.
The Department of Justice is reviewing what avenues might be available.
And the trial of an illegal alien facing murder charges in the deaths of 2 California deputies kicks off with chaos.
We killed more of them.
We'll debate what this trial means for the sanctuary state debate.
I wonder if I would even be here today talking to you about my loss if the government better enforced immigration law.
President Trump declares today National Religious Freedom Day. So how is the president doing on that front?
Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. Behind closed doors tonight, House Republican leaders reportedly pitching a new strategy for getting Democrats on board with a funding deal before that midnight Friday deadline when the money runs out and the shutdown gets real. The Hill website reporting the offer includes funding for the Children's Health Insurance Program and the delay of some of Obamacare's medical device and Cadillac Health Plan taxes. But it's what it doesn't include that is going to be the sticking point, a resolution for some 800,000 people who are in this country illegally. We've got team coverage tonight. Peter Ducey looking into an administration report linking terrorism with our broken immigration system full of holes. Chad Pergram over on Capitol Hill with all the behind-the-scenes scoop from this Steve Bannon hearing today. And we begin with Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry on efforts to keep the government open while putting the president's controversial comments behind him. Good evening, Ed.
Shannon, great to see you. Today's big Senate hearing was supposed to be contentious because it was going to be all about President Trump's plan to build a wall on the southern border. It got contentious, but for another reason, about what he said or didn't say behind closed doors about Haiti and various African countries last week. Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen had held firm in saying she did not hear the president utter the word "asshole," leading Democrat Cory Booker to charge that what he called her silence and amnesia made her complicit in the president's comments. Nielsen clearly trying to pivot and change the narrative, send a signal to the president's political base that the focus should not be on his words but on deeds, and that the fact that he is taking action to crack down on illegal immigration. The secretary announcing today the administration is talking to federal prosecutors about criminal charges against local officials in sanctuary cities that refuse to follow through on federal orders to deport criminals. Also new today, the Department of Justice revealed it's going to try and go directly to the Supreme Court to fast-track its appeal of a federal judge's ruling in San Francisco that new DACA application can start. As the head of the Justice Department, Attorney General Jeff Sessions told Fox tonight, enough is enough.
What good does it do to bring in somebody who's illiterate in their own country, has no skills, and is going to struggle in our country and not be successful? That is not what a good nation should do, and we need to get away from it.
But Republican Lindsey Graham today charged that's a dramatic turn from 1 week ago today, when the president gathered leaders in both parties in the cabinet room and said he wanted a bipartisan deal where he would take care of the DACA kids, quote, with love, while also tightening border security. Graham charges that last Thursday morning around 10 a.m., he and Democratic Senator Dick Durbin called over to the president to read him in on a bipartisan deal they were putting together. But by the time they made it to the Oval Office at noon, someone on the White House staff, like senior advisor Stephen Miller, a hardliner on immigration, had convinced the president to turn against the deal. Here's Graham lashing out today.
Something happened between 10 and 12, and I like Secretary Nielsen. She's a nice person, and we'll get to the bottom of this, but here's what's going to matter. How does it end? How does it end? Does it end with the government shutting down? We cannot do this with people in charge at the White House who have an irrational view of how to fix immigration.
Well, they did not take kindly to that at the White House. A senior administration official fired back to me. That is not how this played out. This official said Graham and Durbin begged for an Oval Office meeting to present their own deal that went around a framework that House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy was already working on with conservatives. This official declaring of Graham, quote, he tried to sabotage the framework. Nobody knew what was in the damn Graham plan. The president was frustrated and hit him with questions, and Lindsey had no expletive answers, this official said, so the president shut him down. So the question now tonight is, will the government shut down, with some Democrats insisting they will not support a budget deal to keep the government open without a clean DACA bill? Well, I spoke to this senior administration official who told me tonight, quote, we can call that bluff all day long, meaning that the White House believes that they're going to dig in and demand that they get a broader deal where, yes, there's codifying DACA, but also funding for the wall, an end to chain migration, and an end to the visa lottery program. That's a lot to get done by the end of the week. They're still hopeful at the White House they can do it, Shannon.
Well, burning the midnight oil there. Ed Henry, thank you very much. The president this evening linking immigration reform to a new report on terrorism. He says it shows that nearly 3 in 4 individuals convicted of terrorism-related charges since 2001 are foreign-born. We have submitted to Congress a list of resources and reforms we need to keep America safe, including moving away from a random chain migration and lottery system to one that is merit-based. And DHS Secretary Nielsen says those numbers are just the beginning.
This does not include those convicted of domestic terrorism or those convicted on separate charges or those convicted in state courts. And it does not, of course, include those that law enforcement has yet to encounter. This report, unfortunately, is likely just the tip of the iceberg.
Peter Doocy is looking into the controversial report, breaking down the numbers. He joins us now live. Hi, Peter.
Shannon, there's a reason the White House is not budging on immigration talks. They want to end chain migration. They want to end the visa lottery program because their Department of Homeland Security just churned out some new numbers that blame those policies for terrorist attacks and plots. The new DHS report finds that between 9/11 and the end of 2016, out of the 549 people convicted of international terrorism in the U.S., 402 of them were either not U.S. citizens or they were foreign-born and then naturalized. That's 73%. There is no breakdown available of how many came here using chain migration or a visa won in a lottery system, but the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, breaks it down like this. He says, quote, "Our law enforcement professionals do amazing work, but it is simply not reasonable to keep asking them to risk their lives to enforce the law while we admit thousands every year without sufficient knowledge about their backgrounds." However, some Democratic lawmakers now think that the administration's attempt to end chain migration is off base.
Someone can bring in an entire family tree, which includes just about anybody you can think of, and that is not how migration works.
And tonight, there is new reason to think the feds could start majorly cracking down on sanctuary cities where state and local lawmakers are ignoring federal requests for cooperation with immigration authorities very soon, because the DHS chief, Kirstjen Nielsen, revealed there is talk at Maine Justice of arresting mayors and others who will not play ball.
My question is whether DHS is currently working with the Justice Department to bring any criminal charges against state or local officials.
I believe the request was made. The Department of Justice is reviewing what avenues might be available.
So while much of the public posturing about an immigration deal has been about DACA and people brought here illegally as little kids, the administration is highlighting instead what they see as the public safety risk of crimes committed by illegal immigrants. Shannon.
All right, Peter Doocy, thank you very much. And a new report alleges congressional investigations into the infamous dirty dossier are going beyond the Justice Department and FBI and are now looking into a possible connection to former President Obama's State Department. The Washington Examiner reporting that House Intelligence Committee members may be looking into what individual State Department officials may have done to help ex-British agent Christopher Steele compile the dossier on President Trump. Well, reporters were not allowed in, but we're told Steve Bannon invoked executive privilege tonight in his House Intelligence Committee testimony, making it tougher to find out what he meant or actually said when he allegedly called that Donald Trump Jr. meeting at Trump Tower with a Russian lawyer treasonous. The White House backing its former chief strategist in this way. Check it out.
As with all congressional inquiries touching upon the White House, Congress must consult with the White House prior to obtaining confidential material. This is part of a judicially recognized process that goes back decades. We've been cooperating fully with these ongoing investigations and encourage the committees to work with us to find an appropriate accommodation in order to ensure Congress obtains information necessary to its legitimate interests.
All right, a lot to parse there. Fox News senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram has been breaking scoop from inside this meeting all day. Joins us now with details. What can you tell us tonight, Chad?
Well, the House Intelligence Committee was closed today. Once those doors close, I was told long ago by a member of the Intelligence Committee that those of us on the outside always want to know what's going inside. And boy, we sure wanted to know what was happening in there today. And truth be told, we kind of found out. It was pretty chaotic. Steve Bannon was brought up to talk about the Russia investigation, and things were going along rather swimmingly for the first hour and a half. And then, in the words of several sources, things got squirrely. And that's why I talked to Mike Conaway, Republican Republican of Texas, who is a member of the Intelligence Committee.
We started today at a voluntary basis, transitioned to a subpoena midday, continued to ask questions. We've now recessed. The subpoena remains in effect, and we will work to get the answers that we want to our
and
questions.
what prompted that change partway about
we
an
weren't
hour?
getting all the answers that we wanted, and so we subpoenaed Mr. Bannon to try to compel answers.
Now think about how strange this is to have a witness there and suddenly they say, wait a minute, I can't answer things about the transition. I've been told by the White House counsel that I can't answer about things that happened when I was on the White House staff. And then he clammed up. And this is where one source said to me that this was a, quote, BS privilege. There's no such thing as a transition privilege. And this is where Democrats and Republicans got together. Listen to what Trey Gowdy, Republican from South Carolina, had to say about this.
It is the most tortured analysis of executive privilege I have ever heard of.
Now, you can have executive privilege if you're talking to the president, but anything out that scope, it starts to get a little bit strange. What they have done, and you heard what Mike Conaway said, the subpoena still applies, and they're going to have him back before the Intelligence Committee, Steve Bannon, on Thursday afternoon. Now, here is the schedule. Tomorrow, Rick Dearborn, the former deputy White House chief of staff and campaign official, transition official, he's going to appear. Also, Corey Lewandowski. And then on Friday, we're going to have Hope Hicks, the White House communications director, Shannon.
All right. Now, Chad, how much does this have to do, this, asserting the subpoena as you have a witness sitting there, to do with Congress trying to kind of reassert some control over these various investigations and forcing a witness to comply with them when they've got questions of their own?
That has a lot to do with it because, Congress takes its first Article 1 responsibilities in the Constitution very seriously. And that's what was so dramatic today when you have a very controversial, almost polarizing witness like Steve Bannon coming up here. You have Democrats who certainly aren't on his side. You may have had Republicans who may have sided with him at one point. And don't forget that a lot of people thought that he single-handedly helped them lose the Alabama Senate race a couple of weeks ago, Roy Moore versus Doug Jones. Mitch McConnell pretty much said as much a couple of weeks ago. So Steve Bannon does not have a lot of allies on Capitol Hill. So this is what was unique, where you have Democrats and Republicans on that committee that has often been at each other's throats, Democrats and Republicans, suddenly getting together and say, we need to have this witness and we need to hear from him.
See, Steve Bannon is bringing people together, Chad. That's the bottom line of the story tonight. Thank you for all of your tireless work on this story today. We appreciate it, Chad.
Anytime, Shannon.
All right, as we tick closer to the possibility of a shutdown, many on both sides seem to be conceding it's going to be impossible to get a comprehensive long-term funding deal done that includes addressing the DACA situation by Friday. So did the president's rough language behind closed doors give Democrats the tool they needed to now publicly force his hand? Here's Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
If you want to begin the long road back to prove you're not prejudiced or bigoted, support the bipartisan compromise, one that was aimed at meeting the concerns you voiced. Give the Dreamers safety here in America and bolster border security at the same time. This may be the last train leaving the station. President Trump needs to get on board.
All right, so what if he says no thanks, doesn't get on that train, and we instead end up with a shutdown? Chris Stirewalt is Fox News politics editor and author of The Halftime Report, joins us live.
Oh, dear.
All right, we are ready to talk your daily odds on whether you think we are heading to a shutdown.
Well, it depends on whether or not Paul Ryan was whistling past the graveyard tonight. So the House Speaker says they've got the votes, or he believes they can get the votes, to have a Republican-only 1-month extension of current spending levels and, as you mentioned before, a 6-year deal, which is something that will mollify a lot of Republicans who are anxious, a 6-year deal on a program that basically provides health insurance for many million poor kids. So this is the deal that Ryan thinks he can have. If they can do it, if he can get to 219 votes and push it through on Republican-only votes, it's going to be hard for Democrats in the Senate to say, no, shut down the government now. We don't want a month to negotiate. That's the House position. Ryan hopes, and he also hopes, that the Freedom Caucus doesn't take away the votes that he needs to get it through. But that's his hope, is that he can now leverage on Democrats and say, hey, we just need another month to work on DACA. Give us the time.
Yeah, it sounds like tonight that there is some reporting from Chad and from others that Mark Meadows of the Freedom Caucus is suggesting that they have the votes to block this if that's what they decide to do. Okay, I want to play a little bit of what Senator Tom Cotton, a Republican, has to say about this potential shutdown.
If the Democrats want to shut down the government over this, they can. They have the ability to filibuster any bill in the Senate. I don't think that will work out very well for them, so I suspect they will not.
One of the reasons that I think we might have a shutdown, whether it's this Friday or whether it's in a month or whenever we get there, one of the reasons that I think it is increasingly likely that we have a shutdown is that both parties are arrogant. Both parties feel like, oh, we'll do better in the shutdown than you will. You know, there's snakes in the house, so we're going to light it on fire, and we'll come out of this okay. Somebody is wrong in this scenario. One of these two parties is wrong in this scenario. And I think part of what they're missing is that we've never been here before. We started the modern budgeting era in 1974 with the change in rules. We have never in that whole time had a shutdown when one party controlled both Congress and the White House. The calculus is different here. The Republicans are going to get a lot of blame, but also the Republicans in the White House can act differently towards the shutdown. They can mitigate the factors. They can make sure that things are prioritized and paid on time. Over on this column, they can push off the harmful side effects. So everybody needs to think anew and act anew about the shutdowns in the Trump era.
Well, it's interesting because we hear from one of the senior Democrats over on the Senate side, Patrick Leahy, and now he sounds like he's trying to play the president's game with him about publicly calling him out and making suggestions about how this is going to make him look. Here's what he said.
The Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, and they control the presidency. The government stays open if they want to stay open. It shuts down if they want it to shut down. It'd be humiliating for the United States. It'd be humiliating for the president. I'd be amazed he'd want to humiliate himself that way.
Talking about the president being publicly humiliated, that's the kind of thing I think that would get under his skin.
That would, and of course, it would be humiliating for Republicans in the sense that they do have control of both houses. Now, look, they rely on 9 Democrats, because remember, they don't have budget reconciliation anymore. They use that for the tax cut. So this would be bad for them.